Hi everyone, it's Judith Grandpa's Creations. Thanks for joining me again. I thought since it's my last YouTube of the year, I would do something slightly different. Instead of showing you a gadget, I would show you how I go about cutting my fabric out when I'm dressmaking. So here are some tips that I use that I wish I'd known years ago. So the first thing that I do is when I get some dressmaking fabric, I don't do this when I make bags or quilts or anything like that, but what I do is I wash my fabric. But what I do first is I finish the edges, the raw edges, not the selvages because that shouldn't fray, but the top and bottom of the fabric where it's been cut to length, I actually overlock and then I wash. Now this is something I learned this year from several different places. But if you don't do that, you get a knotty mess in your machine, or when it comes out, it's a knotty mess. So yeah, that's what I do first of all, and that saves a lot of hassle. Then I make sure that I give my fabric a good press. And the reason why I wash and dry and press my fabric is that if you don't, and again I've done this, I've learnt the hard way, if you don't, then it could shrink on you. It's quite likely to shrink by about 5%, if not more. And then you've made a lovely garment, you wash it for the first time, and then it doesn't fit you when it comes out of the machine. So, well worth doing. The second thing is find yourself plenty of space to lay your fabric out, because if you don't, you're going to find that maybe your pattern pieces won't lie straight. So that, again, that's what I've learned. So the next thing is you need to gather your equipment. So the things that you'll need are things like a tape measure, pins, maybe pattern weights if you've got them. You obviously need your pattern, you need your fabric, you need any interfacing that you might need for the pattern, the garment, and a good pair of shears, or if you haven't got any shears, a good pair of long bladed scissors that are sharp. So then what you need to do is, or what I do, I should say, is I check which way round the pattern goes on my fabric, because I have been known to cut something out and the pattern is upside down. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you've got a spot, doesn't matter, but a lot of times it does matter. If you've got a flower that's upside down, sometimes again that doesn't matter, but often it does. So make sure that your fabric is the right way up and your pattern pieces on that are the right way up on your fabric and all facing the same way from top to bottom. So then it's time to actually fold your fabric. So you can either fold it selvage to selvage, or sometimes you can, depending on what size your pattern pieces are, you can actually fold the two bits of the fabric over so the selvages are together and you've got the fabric underneath. So I'll show you what I mean later, but make sure that the selvage is actually the same distance from the fold, however you fold your fabric, all the way down. That's really important, because that way you get a straight grain, which means when you cut your pieces, the pieces are not going to twist. So the grain mark on your pattern pieces need to be the same distance all the way down. That grain line has to be the same distance all the way down from your selvage. That's really, really important. I brought a dress once and it drove me mad. I didn't make it, I bought it. It drove me mad because it always twisted on the body, and that's because it hadn't been cut properly on the grain. So at this point, I then either weight my pattern pieces down to my fabric, or I pin, and I pin really well so that when you're cutting, nothing moves too much. I don't think you can totally avoid it, but you want to try and stop the pattern piece from moving on your fabric, and your fabric from moving at all, ideally. So pin, pin, pin. So I made a top recently, and this is where all the photos are from in the video. But I started off with my fabric folded one way, and then because of the way the pattern needed to be laid on the fabric, I actually changed how I put my fabric together. And then for the last bit, I had to cut a big bias strip out. And so I unfolded completely the fabric. So just had one single layer completely out, and then I laid it so that I had the grain line against the selvage. So there's nothing wrong in cutting your pieces out and then changing how you fold your fabric together. Just make sure that the selvage, the grain line is parallel to the selvage at all times, however you folded your fabric. So once you have done all that, you're ready to cut, and you cut as accurately round your pattern pieces as you can. And then what you need to do is you need to put your markings. So your notches from the pattern, you need to find a way of marking those on the fabric, whether that be a tailor tack, whether that be a tiny snip into your seam allowance, or friction pen it, whatever, chalk, whatever you want to do. But you must put all your markings from your pattern pieces onto the fabric, because once you've taken that pattern piece off, you won't know where those, and you have to keep putting it back. And so do that from the start. That's good. And my last tip is that, this is another thing that I've learnt by mistakes, is leave your pattern pieces on your fabric until you go to use them, until you go to sew them. Leave them on the fabric, the pattern pieces, so you always know which bit you're picking up to use next. And as you go through your pattern, what I do, what I was taught to do, is actually, as you do each instruction, tick it off. So if you go away to answer the door, you come back, you know exactly where you are, because you've ticked everything that you've done, so you know where you're starting again. So I hope you found this useful. I thought doing something a little bit different. I was cutting out a top the other day, and I thought this would be a different thing to do for the last video of the year. So happy sewing, everybody, over the holidays, and I will see you next year. Bye for now.